Hello and welcome to this preview video of DigiStix 2. In this video I want to cover all the differences between DigiStix 1 and DigiStix 2, and I want to go over all the new features that have been added to this version. As well as the obvious UI changes, there's been a lot of big changes under the hood, including the ability to now have 64 individual pads with 5 layers of samples on each pad. So you can create some pretty huge kits using DigiStix 2. I've also made a lot of usability changes within the app which make making multi-layer, multi-sample kits far easier with this version, and all that will be explained shortly. So I want to begin this video with the changes to the user interface. And one of the major restructuring exercises was to make this more iPad friendly, and I've dropped support for the iPhone on DigiStix 2. So if you want to use DigiStix, you've got to use DigiStix 1. DigiStix 2 was completely redesigned so that we can maximize full screen mode. Now the big advantage here is that we can now have the grid editor alongside a MPC style 4x4 bank of pads. Because we have 64 sounds now, those pads are actually split into 4 banks of 16, bank A, bank B, bank C and bank D. And if I tap on one of these pads, you'll notice a little window above the 4x4 pads actually shows information about the sample that was last played. And it is from this window we can get access to a lot of information and options for the selected pad and the individual sample layers. Now if I select pad bank B, you'll notice not only the names of the samples assigned to the pads change, but also the actual grid layout on the left changes too, and only shows the instruments available for those pads in pad bank B. Same for pad bank C and pad bank D. Now if we take a look at the sample pad window above the drum pads, to the top right of there's actually an option which allows us to change what is currently displayed. So currently we're displaying pad samples, but we can actually use these two arrow keys at the top right to actually flick between settings. So here for instance we have the effect settings and volume for that layer, and again they reflect what pad was last pressed, so it's easy to move between settings for various pads and change them all at the same time. Now the next page allows us to set the actual individual layer velocities for each of the 5 layers, and for velocity mode we can set the start and end trigger points. Here we can choose between 3 different trigger modes, including round robin and individual velocity layers, as well as other options such as looping and retriggering and reverse mode. Here we can tune each layer of the sample, and there is an overall sample tuning which I'll show you later. We've also got the ability to assign mute groups directly from within here, which is great. You can go through the whole pad bank and assign your hi-hats and cymbals and whatever to specific mute groups from here. And the final page allows us to specify the output bus 1 to 8. There are actually 10 output buses in DigiStix, but the last 2 are special case options that are unique to DigiStix 2, and I'm going to explain them later because they're all to do with routing effects. Now anyone that's come from DigiStix 1 will recognise the fact that the controller edit screen on DigiStix 1 was on a separate screen, so it was hard to correlate the 2 settings side by side. But now in DigiStix 2 the controller lane is pad specific, so as we tap on a pad you can see where the notes velocities appear within the controller lane, and we can quickly and easily switch to something like pan and draw in a random set of pans for those notes. So as you can see here, I'm actually panning left and right those specific notes. And we could also do the same for pitch and just drag over the lane. It will only apply a pitch change to anywhere where there's a note actually laid. And if I play that back now, it's going to be a bit hectic, we're not going to hear it, but if I solo, tap on the name in the header for hi-hat, we can hear that the pitch and the pan are being modulated. It might be worth, because it's a hi-hat, I'll just push it to extremes for you to hear a little bit better. Now, although I didn't demonstrate it, there's actually two more options in the controller lane that allow you to gate into the delay and reverb effects. Now, DigiStix 2 is also General MIDI compatible in two different ways. First, we now have a whole bunch of General MIDI recorded drums which are available to you in the GM folder. Also, if you use some of the DigiStix drums from the DigiStix default folder, these, although they're in DigiStix format, you can actually enable the emulation, General MIDI emulation mode, which will remap incoming MIDI notes to DigiStix and give you the correct notes. But even better than that, there's an automated way to record your own GM drum kits using autosample. So all you need to do to use this function is to create a new drum kit in the user folder, since the user folder is an editable folder. In this case, I'm going to create a new kit called My Kit. And if you look at the top right above the 4x4 pads, you'll see a menu, and we can pick auto sample from here. Now, this dialog allows us to configure just about everything we need to actually send MIDI out to an external MIDI synth and then record the incoming data and create our own general MIDI kits on the fly. In this case, I'm just going to record 8 notes from my MIDI hardware, and I'm doing nothing. It's sending out the MIDI data and it's doing all the recording for me. Nothing could be easier. So we could actually set that up to record different ranges of notes from your external keyboard to various positions within the banks, the 4 banks of your drum kit. And once they're recorded, you can test those out. If you find something that didn't quite record right, you can actually record an individual pad again. We can also do some minor editing, such as cropping, normalizing, fading and such like within the built-in editor. Now, we had this kind of auto sampler built in to Chameleon, but this one takes a step further and allows us to do multi-layer. So you just set the number of layers. In this case, I'm just going to set it to 3, and we're just going to record 4 layers of 3. Well, 4 samples of 3 layers, just to show you how this works. So if you take a look at the pad window, you will see the 3 layers building up on each pad before it progresses to the next pad. And that's a great way of building up multi-velocity control on a single pad. So you're assigning 3 samples to each pad, and each sample is given its own velocity range. Now, by default, all new drum kits are assigned the DigiStix default names instead of the general MIDI names. So if you go and pick set pad defaults and pick general MIDI defaults, it will set up the MIDI mapping and the names for a general MIDI kit. We can also turn on the velocity sensitive pads here and test out the velocity layers we've just set up. The higher on the pad you hit, the higher the velocity. So earlier in this video I made reference to the fact there is now 10 output buses within DigiStix 2, but the last 2, 9 and 10, are actually for effect sends. To demonstrate how this works, I've loaded DigiStix into AUm, and as you can see here, the internal delay and reverb are enabled. Now, with the pad window showing the effects screen, it's simply a question of tapping the pad you want to add effects to, and then turning the internal reverb and delay sends up. So now you can hear the loop running with internal effects. But what if we want to route through external effects? How do we do that? Well, the secret is to turn off the delay and reverb at the top, and you'll see that they now say bus 9 and bus 10. And if we take a look at AUM, you can see that I've actually got 2 additional audio channels taking input from bus 9, which is the delay, and bus 10, which is the reverb out. And it's just a question of, in this case, I've added bliss, delay and reverb to those 2 channels, but you could add anything you want essentially. Now it's just a question of going back into DigiStix and sending a proportion of that drum out to those additional effect channels. So it's pretty easy and straightforward really. And as I turn on and off those internal and external effects, you can hear the difference. Now in the past you may have had a couple of favourite kits and had to run 2 instances side by side in order to get the combination of sounds you wanted. So I'm going to show you an easy way to create a new kit. In this case I'm just going to call it a huge kit because I'm going to import 4 different sound banks from 4 different other kits into this single kit. And to do that, I'm going to press the browse button and browse the kits within DigiStix. I'm going to go to the default bank and I'm going to look for the EDM kit. The EDM kit is one of my favourite original DigiStix kits. So I'm going to click the import bank button and I'm going to say I want to import bank A from this kit. And it will import that bank into the currently selected bank of the loaded huge kit. So we can preview that and make sure the sounds are what we want. Then we hit bank B in our huge kit. There's nothing there assigned at the minute, so we can hit the browse button, go back to the default bank. I'm going to stick an electronic kit, I think, next. This first electronic kit. I'm going to import bank, and I'm going to import bank A again. Then a sound effect kit probably. So let's find a sound effect kit and import that. And for the final bank D, let's go and import a strange kit and click the import bank and import bank A from there into this. So now we should have 4 banks of sounds from different kits within our huge kit. So now we've got some sounds. I want to make just a basic 4 on the floor rhythm. Now if you notice here, there's a hamburger menu above the song pane and the grid song construction grid, and there's also one above the pad grid. So they're actually context sensitive and have options available that are applicable to that section. So if I click on the hamburger menu above the edit grid and just save the song or the pattern that we've got currently edited, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to preview this pattern a minute. And we're going to use the randomize option. The randomize option has expanded somewhat. This with us having now 4 banks of 16 samples, we can actually very easily and quickly select individual samples or whole pad banks from this screen and randomize patterns from here. When you find some notes you actually like, you can switch over to randomize options only and just apply pan and pitch and get some very interesting variations. So that's a quick look at the randomization feature, something that's had to change because of the addition of 64 unique pads. But I want to take a look now at multi-layer configuration. In particular, how easy it is now to set up multi-layer velocity sensitive pads. Now if I switch pad bank to bank B, you'll see that there's no actual samples assigned here, hence the ghosted names within the pads themselves. But I'm going to drag a couple of samples in from the iOS Files app. As you can see there, I dragged a sample in and it's become layer 1. If I select layer 3 and drag another sample on top of that, you'll see that we've now got samples on layers 1 and 3. And finally I'm going to select layer 2 in the pad window and just drag another sample on top of there. So we've now got samples assigned to 1, 2 and 3. So we're basically done with the Files app window for now, so let's slide that out of the way. And I just want to show you that those 3 layers are directly editable just by clicking the edit button. If I press the edit button, it edits whatever layer is currently selected. So we can preview and edit layers a lot easier than we could before. Now if we tap through to the layer velocity page within the pad window, you'll see that we can select, specify rather, a layer velocity for each of those layers and a range. Now that range is not used ordinarily unless we change to a mode that uses that range, but we can set these up so that each sample layer has a different velocity start and end, and I'm going to do that now. So the basic idea here is to split up the velocity range of 0 to 127 into 3 equal ranges for each layer, and when the incoming velocity exceeds the lowest level for that sample, it will sound. Now I've turned the layer velocity button on so we can actually get some velocity range directly from tapping on the pads, and I'm just going to change the mode to round robin. And in round robin mode it just alternates between the 3 samples we've dropped on the pad. So now I'm going to select the velocity layers option, and as I tap further and further up that pad, the height of that pad, you'll hear the different layers kicking in. So as you can see, the velocity pad mode utilises those high and low ranges we set up for each of the layers. Okay, now on to pitching of individual layers. And to do that, we just simply move forward to the next page, the layer tuning page. And on here, you'll see that there's a little red cursor. We need to click on semitones and the cursor will move to semitones. And then we can use these 2 little up and down buttons at the right hand side of the pad window to change the semitone setting for that layer. So that covers actually tuning each of the samples that go to make up a pad. But what about pad tuning? And the way we do that is to tap on the pad and hit the options button, and we get a whole set of pad options which mirror basically what's inside the pad window here. But from here we can actually set a global tuning for that pad. So the layer tuning and the pad tuning go up to make the overall tone of the pad once pressed. Now the last thing I want to mention before making this video too long is that some of the old features such as pad references are still here in DigiStix 2, and that was very useful for actually expanding and creating custom banks of samples for your song without the need to actually physically import the actual sample itself. So what we can do is we can actually press the assign button within DigiStix and pick drum samples from other existing kits to assign to the pads in our current song. So in this case I'm going to import some samples from one of the GM kits. You can just tap on the sample to preview. Once you've found a sample, tap on a pad and hit the assign button, at which point you'll be asked whether you want to add a drum reference or import the sample. Now I've just picked import drum reference, add reference here, and you'll see that instead of turning white, the labels turn blue, which informs you that's a drum reference. So no sample data has actually been copied here, it's just a reference into the other kit. And these sample references can be stored within your song, so you can build up sounds from different kits without any additional storage space whatsoever. Now just like in DigiStix 1, you can tap and hold on a pad and actually pick the clear references option from the pop-up menu. Alternatively, you can select the hamburger menu at the top right of the pad window and clear all references in one go. Now one last thing before we wrap this up, and that is the ability to use MIDI mapping. Now it's a lot easier now than it was in the previous version of DigiStix. Simply move now to the MIDI mapping page within the pad window, and if I just tap on this virtual keyboard, we can see currently where the pads are assigned. Now suppose now I wanted to assign those first 4 pads an octave down. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is hit the MIDI learn button, and you'll see a little red highlight cursor appear on the pads. You just select the pad you want and then hit the key within the keyboard, external keyboard or whatever setup you've got, and you can just move through the pads that way, just ensuring you do a unique key for each pad. You could assign the same MIDI trigger for 2 different pads if you wish. I don't know why you'd want to do that. So it's as simple as that really. Just turn MIDI learn off once you're finished. Now if you want to revert back to the original default values, you can hit the defaults button and you can choose between DigiStix defaults, in which this kit was, or general MIDI defaults, and we can confirm that by now pressing the original keys on the virtual keyboard, and the notes will have been assigned back to their original positions. So that's just about it for this preview video of DigiStix 2. Please subscribe to the channel to be kept up to date with any future updates and releases. Don't forget to thumb up the video, and I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.